It is now my pleasure to introduce, it's not the rebuttal from Purdue, but it is a Purdue comment by our Associate Vice President for Research and Professor of Biological Sciences, Jeff Bolin. Jeff was also formerly the Associate Dean for Research at the College of Science. Jeff's research interests include biochemistry, structural biology, and macromolecular crystallography. His research grants have been supported by NIH, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Energy, Exxon Corporation, and the Purdue Research Foundation. His degrees are from the University of California at San Diego, and his undergraduate degree was from Purdue. So he's one of our own. Jeff?
Thank you, Jim. And I need to say, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here representing Purdue and its Office of Research and Partnerships. I used to tease my wife because she's embedded in the Department of Medicinal Chemistry and Molecular Pharmacognosy. Longest department name on campus, probably until our earth scientists went after earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences to cover as many letters of the alphabet as possible. So now we're the Office of Research and Partnerships. That's intentional. We're trying to tell people that the university is open for business with both our academic and our corporate sponsors. I'm also glad for the opportunity to encourage you in the work that you're going to put forward during this symposium and in your pursuit of the goals of the symposium. This is really important work. It's timely. It's just a fantastic meeting, and I hope you push yourselves forward towards the goals. In a moment, I'm going to share some thoughts with you about the growing importance of research data management and of collaboration in that endeavor. But first, let me provide you with a little bit of perspective on Purdue and its sponsored programs activities. We're a little bit different from Harvard. To give you some context to the nature of the institution and the prejudices or biases that come from the place where you work and the people you work with. So for those of you who don't know this, Purdue is a state-supported land-grant university and thus has a natural focus on STEM research. There are 40,000 students at the West Lafayette campus, 30,000 undergraduates and approximately 10,000 graduate and professional students from somewhere on the order of 110 different countries. There are 10 colleges. We're organized underneath deans of colleges. There is no school of medicine. The only hospital we have is for animals. We have colleges of veterinary medicine and pharmacy that provide a connection to biomedical research. There's 16,000 staff. 3,000 of those are faculty members, 2,000 in tenure and tenure track type faculty members. Approximately 50% of the faculty are in the colleges of agriculture, engineering, and science, and about 75% of the faculty are in STEM associated departments. We process 3,500 research proposals a year. This year we expect $400 million in awards and $600 million approximately in expenditures. And based on expenditures, the National Science Foundation is our leading federal sponsor, on the order of about $90 million a year. But we have substantial activity from other federal agencies, notably Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and Department of Agriculture, each of which provide more than $30 million a year in support of the research activities on campus. Research administration at Purdue is bifurcated between the sponsored program services, which report up through the treasurer to the president, and our Office of Research and Partnerships, and the executive vice president in that office reports directly to the president. So let's get back to the business at hand. Let's look at one statement of the goals for this conference. And I stole this from the invitation letter that went to the head of our unit, Suresh Garamella, and it said something like this: with participation of a variety of stakeholders, the goal is to chart a basic course for universities to follow in lifecycle management of data. I don't know which one of the organizing committee wrote that sentence or something close to that, but it's a really nice sentence to work with. There are two key premises embedded in that statement. I think they're easy to accept on their face. First, many different stakeholders have interests. Students, faculty, archivists, information and data specialists in multiple domains, research offices, compliance offices, and so on. Rick told you about some of the complexity of those issues here at Harvard. Second, I think the statement implies that university-wide solutions are possible and perhaps are preferred targets. In any case, the two premises put together imply collaborative and broad solutions, and I hope to return to that theme often enough so that sticks. That's the bottom line. I think that it's possible to have collaborative and broad solutions, at least at an institution like Purdue. So I'm a stakeholder in this game on at least two fronts, as a faculty member and a scientist, and as a research administrator. And I'd like to discuss the situation before us, drawing on my experiences in both roles. And I get to put in the disclaimer here, I'm not an expert in data management. So there's a very good chance everything I say you've heard before, or most of what I say you will have heard before. And that's an inherent risk for talks like this. It just happens. But wise conference organizers constrain the risk for all of us by constraining the time that's available to repeat the same things over and over again. Let me first reflect on the matter as a scientist from a field of molecular biology that's now called structural biology. This field has drawn scientists and techniques from physics, chemistry, biology, and computing sciences from its beginnings. And early in my experience, Rick alluded to this too, as is common in other fields, the outcomes of research were documents, dissertations, and papers in archival journals, and small batch distillations, if you will, of the big mash of data. The data themselves are stored in notebooks. I have data on punched paper tape, on computer cards, on 2,400-foot reels of magnetic tape, and every kind of magnetic media you could possibly imagine. I can't get at most of it. It was stored to allow revisitation in case the referee of my paper insisted that I repeat some calculation or some experiment, but it was not stored in a way that encouraged its use in the future, even by me, much less by someone else. Nevertheless, since I've been in science for 40 years, it was quite clear, even as an undergraduate student, that we place value in curated collections of data that was solidly prepared and solidly maintained. And the printed handbooks of chemistry and physics come to mind for me. I've had copies in my office or lab and at home for 40 years, one in each. As my field expanded and gained prominence, we, or most of us, embraced the need to disseminate data through international databases, such as the Protein Data Bank and databases of protein and nucleic acid sequences. In my field, it was quite some number of years ago that open access to the data became a requirement for publication, and then later a requirement for funding. It is a new and very important component of responsible conduct of research. And it's a primary mechanism to curate in the scientist sense and correct the scientific record. By exposing our data and our models to the rest of our community, the errors are uncovered, papers are withdrawn, and science moves forward in the way that we ideally expect it to. We were lucky in my field because we were in the game early. And because we were in a prominent biomedical field, that brought dollars to the table. And we basically, the public, thank you all, have paid for our key data management services for many, many years. We were also lucky because the services began and evolved with strong and consistent input from the community itself. We controlled the process. We reviewed the proposals for the data management services. We served on the boards of directors, and we got what we wanted out of it. There's some other things that are thrown in there for the benefit of others, but basically it's a service that serves us well. My other stakeholder role here is as an associate vice president for research, and that leads to much different concerns and based on different specific responsibilities. First and foremost, one of my responsibilities is research development services, and in that role, my colleagues and I facilitate the research and scholarship of the faculty, period. We promote their success in achieving funding. We try to provide them facile access to research tools that support their efforts, and we help them achieve recognition for their contributions. Second, and I do less of this, thank heavens, than others, we manage relationships with the sponsors of the research and work to assure compliance with the terms and conditions of sponsors. The dollars don't come without terms and conditions. We have responsibilities to our sponsors to do certain things with the dollars and with the data they produce. So in both domains, the provision of robust and effective data preservation, discovery, and retrieval systems is a critical matter experiencing pressure on at least two major fronts. First, as you well know, the sponsors of university research, ultimately the public, Congress, and the federal agencies increasingly recognize the value of the original data and insist on its availability. They've come to recognize the value of the MASH before it was selectively distilled. Now, the research project lifecycle can't end with a shelled notebook or files on a personal computer. It's no longer acceptable. The investigator and the institution have new mandates to preserve the original data and make it accessible. Second, as you well know, the investigator, the university, the world at large must fulfill those mandates under the stress of technological advances that can overwhelm us with data. As commonly stated, we're dealing with data streams that are ever increasing in volume, velocity, and variety. When I first started working in macromolecular crystallography, we collected two-dimensional images on X-ray sensitive film and scanned them into digital information with a densitometer. The life cycle for a single image was overnight, developed the X-ray film chemically, waited for it to dry, scanned it with a densitometer. Half a day, one image. We've been using X-ray sources and new detectors, including bump-bonded direct photon counting detectors at the synchrotron sources that can do that experiment in a millisecond. The aperture of the detector is substantially larger. The depth of the data is substantially greater. So we have to deal with this issue of ever-increasing volume, velocity, and variety of data. Fortunately for me, I don't have a lot of variety. It's digital images, baby, and that's pretty much it. I can start and finish with that. To serve our investigators and our sponsors, from the point of view of a research administrator, I'd like to tell you we desperately need your best efforts and solutions to data management problems. We're really willing for you folks to be the leader and to bring us home to a better place than we are right now. I admitted earlier that I'm not a data management expert yet. I still wish to encourage solutions with particular characteristics. So another part of what I do in research administration is to support and oversee what are called core research facilities. At a single institution similar to Purdue, I think that data management operations should be developed and sustained in a manner similar to other central core university research facilities. You can think of these as locations of instruments, animal care facilities, a machine shop, NMR spectrometers, whatever is used by a large enough number of people and is too expensive to replicate. That's what belongs in a core research facility. So as in other core facilities, the data management service should operate as a collaboration between users, technical experts, and those with oversight responsibility. A tightly controlled top-down deployment that places high demands on the users and is poorly attentive to their immediate and changing needs will not persist. If I can't provide a good NMR facility, my folks will go somewhere else. The same thing will be true for our data management services. the users will turn away and find another solution. It may not be the best one for them or for the university. I also think that an effective collaboration will produce better research. Jim alluded to this a little bit in his presentation. It's foolish to design an implantable medical device without consulting a surgeon. How are they going to put it in if it's the wrong shape, the wrong size? It's also probably foolish to plan a data-rich project without considering the downstream data issues, whether it's analysis of the data or its preservation, curation, and dissemination. We teach this in physical chemistry. You don't know the experiment just because you know the theory. You have to know how to execute it, and you have to know what the software is going to do with your data. If you don't know that, you don't really know what you're producing. I had a physical chemistry professor who asked the simple question, what is pH? Everybody knows what pH is, and all chemists do anyway. There are several nice ways of saying it, but his answer was very simple. It's what a pH meter measures. That's what pH is. And that's the situation with our data. We are able to measure it, but what comes out the end depends upon our ability to analyze it and curate and disseminate it. Pulling data scientists and information experts from the libraries into the planning and upstream elements of the project will yield better outcomes and will help avoid waste and loss of value. We need to move upstream, everybody. The core facility model also implies that we should avoid unnecessary duplication and fragmentation. I don't think we can afford, at Purdue anyway, data management at the level of the college, department, or lab. Isolated and duplicated services are just too costly for us to sustain. Just as we can't afford competing proteomics facilities, I don't think we can afford multiple unfederated data management operations. Now, this leaves a little room for separate data management operations that are at least federated at some level. If the different academic communities need something different, let's help them build what they need, but let's try to take advantage of federation whenever we can. We can't follow the problematic examples of other fragmented information services. The support of email servers and data centers in departments and individual labs is just simply proven to be unsustainable at Purdue. The costs in energy, space, and personnel are simply too high. So we've seen that elimination and consolidation of half of our data centers from roughly 60 to roughly 30 saves energy and personnel and hardware costs alone roughly $500,000 to $1 million a year. It liberates space and it prevents upfront costs devoted to providing special HVAC and power services for new and narrowly focused data services serving a small number of people. The core facility model also argues that data management operations should have a sustainable financial model that recovers some costs from sponsors and when possible, but is backed or subsidized as necessary. That's what we do with our core facilities. We try to recover costs from the sponsors, but we're not dogmatic enough to realize that we can recover all of the costs. So in the realm of information services of any kind, cost recovery is often considered a difficult problem, but we need to deal with it. You need to deal with it, we need to deal with it. And we need to deal with a broad spectrum of research that includes both well-funded, low demand or low complexity data producing projects, lots of money, simple data, as well as low or unfunded scholarship and research that brings in a high demand because of the nature of the data that those disciplines produce. So during this symposium, you'll hear from others about the efforts, challenges, and progress in the development of a campus-wide data management service at Purdue. I'm just going to say that from the outset, the effort depended, as Jim noted, on central investments of people and funding from the libraries, from information technology, sponsored program services, and the Office of Research and Partnerships. It also depended on the involvement and feedback from faculty, students who were testers and users of the tools as they developed. It's best you hear that story from the people who have invested the most, but I simply ask you to listen for evidence that collaboration and shared purpose more important in that endeavor, and as you have thoughts, to offer suggestions for improvement. And finally, as I'm sure you realize, collaboration can't stop at the boundaries of an individual campus. You are the ones that need to think about what associations of scholars, research libraries, and research universities might do to establish and spread good practices and to share resources in this area wherever possible. So thanks for your time and attention. I hope you make outstanding progress towards the goals of the symposium.